Thanks, Kit, for taking the time to chat with us today. Everyone has questions about franchise attorney, and we always get the same questions all the time. So I figured I'd bring you on here with your expertise and professional background to answer some of those questions for us. Would you mind by giving us a little bit about your professional background? Because when you shared it with me, I was extremely impressed.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to tell my tale and also just talk about what I do in franchise law. So yes, so my background. So I was a prosecutor in child abuse and juvenile delinquency, and got a call from a buddy who started a franchise sales organization, and he said, come join us in franchising. And I had no idea what franchising was, but immediately was intrigued and wanted to learn more about it. And so after about a month of mulling it over, I decided to leave the prosecutor's office and join him. And that was a franchise sales organization, St. Gregory Development Group. And that's where I really cut my teeth and started out in legal compliance and reviewing all of the franchise sales presentations and a lot of other materials and laws for the franchisors that we represented. We represented over, I think, 30 different brands. And at that time, I think we sold over, oh, geez, it would have been thousands probably of franchises. It was ridiculous. It was crazy. We sold a ton. And so I got to experience a lot of different brands, some good ones, some bad ones. And then what was really great, where I think I got the most experience and the best relevant experience for what I do now was we launched a brand called Cycle Bar. We launched it from the ground up. This is a franchise that started off with zero. I followed all the paperwork and did all that, created a legal department, legal compliance department, everything, and launched that brand. And that took off like a rocket ship. We sold, there's 250 locations in a couple of years. So after we got these first franchises open, got to actually take the franchise agreement and actually implement it. And so I can understand, why certain clauses are in a franchise agreement, because I've had to use them, to enforce this, the agreement between the franchisor and the franchisee. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride. It's been a lot of fun, and right now I love my job, just helping new entrepreneurs get involved in franchising.
That's what I think is so special about your background is you've been on the other end on the franchisor side. So when you're reviewing documents for people or giving them advice on the franchisee side, you can show them the lens of why things are written in a certain way, how likely are they to be implemented, right? And what the true meaning is. And it just gives you such a more well-rounded view of franchise law.
Absolutely. I agree. I think my background in that does so as well. I've got to experience a lot of just interesting situations. The normal ones where, a franchisee may be in default for sending out an advertisement without getting it approved by the franchisor beforehand. Simple things like that where, a candidate coming into this who doesn't have any franchise experience, and even those that do, don't understand how that works on the other side. Why is the franchisor saying I must do this? What are they thinking? So I can provide that insight to help them understand what the franchisor is thinking, because this shouldn't be a relationship that has any contention. It should be symbiotic. This is a business relationship like no other, where the franchisor doesn't make any money unless the franchisee does. So they want to do everything they can to help a franchisee be successful. It shouldn't be butting heads. You should say, hey, let's work this out. Let's figure out your side, my side, and come together and one united goal. So it's a different type of business, but with the franchisor and the franchisee, if you understand each other's position, you can really understand the business.
Agreed. It should definitely be a symbiotic relationship. I think for someone that doesn't know and is completely new to this, if they asked you, what does a franchise attorney do, at least on the side of the prospective franchisee, how would you respond to that?
So what I do is I spend probably 90% of my time doing FDD reviews. So my wife would probably say that all I do is read all day. And really that is true. Probably a majority of my day is spent reviewing FDDs. It is staying on top of things. So it's not just reviewing FDDs; it is staying on top of the laws because they're constantly changing in all the different states, and also what's going on just temperature wise in terms of all the FDDs that I review. I'm looking for trends. There's some clauses that become more prevalent in certain times, and some that are less prevalent. And then tracking also franchisees' concerns. Wondering what franchisees right now are really thinking. And it's interesting when I ask a franchisee during my initial consultation, I ask them what their fears or concerns are, and I probably get a significant amount that say three basic things like liquidated damages, spousal guarantee. It's kind of these common questions because they don't know why they're in place, what they're needed for. So I walk them through that and any fears or concerns they have.
I'm sure COVID also had an effect as to what people's concerns are with royalties and things like that. So that's interesting. And sometimes when people ask me about finding a franchise attorney, they wonder, do I need to find a franchise attorney near me? Can they work in any state? How would
Good
you?
question. Yes. So I get that frequently. Oh, you're in Cincinnati, Ohio. And, I get to talk to clients that are in often, nice exotic locations, California, Florida, DC, someplace other than the middle of the United States. But anyway, I do love Cincinnati. So, but you do not need to hire a local attorney for this. Franchising is regulated by the FTC. Then you have 14 registration states. But when we're reviewing a contract like this, you don't need to have a bar registration in your particular state. I can review your contracts and review and negotiate and do everything that you need me to do in any state in the country. I can't cross the border in Canada though. I have had a couple of clients that I've had to turn down because they're in Canada. I'm not a Canadian attorney, but I know a few, so I can certainly recommend them to you.
What does that process look like? Let's say someone contacts you. What's the next step?
Yes. So I've got a three-step process, very simple. So we set up initial consultation over Zoom. I want to look you eye to eye and let you see and hear me. I think that's really important. So I have it at 15-minute initial consultation call where I ask your background, the candidate's background, and ask them what led them to be interested in franchising, and then go through and ask them about what they like about franchising, the brands they've looked at, why they're focused in on a particular brand right now. It's typically one, occasionally it'll be two, but most consultants will get it narrowed down to one for them. And so they say, hey, look, this is what I'm concerned about. And I say, fantastic, I get it. I'll explain all that to you when I go through your franchise document review. And so then I explain my background, tell them about myself and my history in franchising. And from there, we schedule a time to talk. That is my analysis review. That's 1.5 hours over Zoom again. And what I do in my analysis review is I show my screen so you can see everything in front of you. And I show my highlights of areas that I want to talk about, areas of concern, areas that other franchisees have been concerned about, overall trends. Hey, you didn't think about this, but I do want to draw your attention to this and let you know, hey, this is this for a reason, and this is that, and explain things. So that's my analysis review. And then afterwards, I actually have the AI note-taking feature, taking notes. So I'll send you a summary of all the points that we discussed and things that you need to follow up on potentially with the franchisor. So that's all included in my review. Franchisees really seem to value that because afterwards they say, boy, oh boy, I had no idea. Thanks for taking an hour and a half to go through it. That's one thing, but I really do truly enjoy it. So it doesn't seem like a job at sometimes.
That's awesome. It's good to take people through and really highlight any red flags or concerns that they might not have seen. It's good to have that extra set of eyes that's familiar with the industry. And I get that you're taking the time with them. Another question I have, and I've had people get answers all over the board, is most people want to know, how much does a franchise attorney cost? How much should they be charging typically? Is there a range?
Sure. I don't really know. I haven't really done an analysis of that. But I think that you may find some franchise attorneys that will charge $2,500, $3,000 for a flat fee review. I did look at a time and see what other competitors were doing because I wanted to price myself below them. I want to offer a good service, but at a good value because I know that franchisees are entering a time where they are going to be spending a lot of money. So, I value that. And so I do want to make this so that it is cost efficient for them. That's why I do a flat fee of 1995.
I've heard 4,000 before, which I thought was,
Oh, double mine.
I know, I was
Maybe
like,
maybe I should look into that. No, no, my rates are going to stay this way for a bit. So, but yeah, that seems very high, and I'm not sure what you'd necessarily get more.
I
Um, you
it's
know,
the same thing. They're pretty standard. They're all structured similarly, and yeah, I have no idea, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, it would behoove you to ask around and talk to another franchise lawyer and see if you also jive with them. If you feel comfortable talking to them, because they are going to be your guide through this, and you shouldn't feel uncomfortable talking to them. You shouldn't be afraid to raise your hand and ask questions and feel maybe perhaps not that smart in certain areas. Just say, hey, look, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And I appreciate that. And I hold franchisees' hands. I understand that. At one point, I was that. When I left the prosecutor's office, I had no idea what an FDD was, no idea what a franchise agreement was, and would use those terms interchangeably like everybody does, until I figured out what it was, and understood it all. But I think that my mom's a therapist, and so I feel like sometimes my job is also a therapist, to help hold their hand and let them know, hey, look, this is normal. This is normal, and you don't lose all your rights when you walk into this. The franchise agreement was written by them, so it's going to favor them, of course. But they need to have these protections in place to protect the system. You don't want to have one rogue franchisee out there, doing something wrong and affecting the system, hurting 99 other franchisees. You want to make sure the franchisor has the mechanisms in place to prevent something like that from happening.
certainly. And besides asking, how much does a franchise attorney cost? What other questions should people be asking when they're interviewing a franchise attorney?
Sure, they should definitely ask about experience. Ask the attorney if they've drafted an FDD, if they've drafted a franchise agreement, if they've actually implemented franchise agreements terms. Um, you know, uh, it I think you get a certain level of understanding something by actually doing it. Yes, you can study it, in a wood paneled mahogany office, but it's totally different working for a franchisor and understanding that business mindset of what they need to be doing and how they need to be protecting the brand and how they need to be supporting you as a franchisee, what they need to be doing. So I also, I look at it from that. Like, hey, I know where we needed to improve, and when I see franchisors that need to improve and they're addressing issues, I think, wow, that's a great franchise system. Because there are going to be mistakes and missteps, especially with emerging brands. But it's the franchisors that adapt and help their franchisees and put them first and foremost, that'll be successful.
Absolutely. I think another question, depending on what's going on with the way you're pacing your discovery day or anything else, is what's the turnaround, right? If you're going to discovery day and they're telling you 2 weeks, it's just might not align with what your goals are unless they're extremely experienced. Another thing I would say is, have they looked at that brand before? That's always interesting to know, or what types of brands that they usually work with, maybe.
Yeah. I get that question about, have you looked at this brand before? And sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't. You know, I've reviewed in the past 6 months at least 30 something brands, and so whether or not it's the first time or the 10th time, I provide the same attention and go through the document page by page for every FDD. So it's not, I don't have a sale or like a template FDD for a brand I look at all the time. I look at yours, the one they sent you, the one that you signed. That's the
Right.
highlighted version. So I literally go through that. And what's interesting is I had a client who said, "Oh yeah, you've reviewed this brand multiple times. Fantastic, great." So they sent me the FDD, and I was looking through it, and I let them know, "Hey, did you know the FDD was just revised 2 days ago?" And they said, "No, no, no." So I said, "Look, this is a new FDD now. I mean, completely new FDD." So there weren't a whole lot of changes, and I highlighted that and was able to show them the red line copy and do all that. But you know, it was one of those situations where, yeah, that's why I look at the same FDD over and over again, just to make sure that I'm catching something and not missing anything.
No, that's important too. But definitely like based on, I think timeline is one thing you should really consider if you're pacing for your discovery day, or they have a time, like a signing date already set up for you. If you're, when you're approved like that, sometimes then it's just, pedal to the metal. Um, but yeah, you have to kind of look at it with fresh eyes. So they do make changes all the time.
Yes, yes, and so with the timeline too, yeah, you know, I have a quick turnaround time. I had one client who was heading off to discovery day the next day, and said, "Could you do basically same day?" And I was able to move some things around and talk to them at like 8 o'clock at night and run through it. So I understand that there are these, you know, time pressures. You know, you've got, yeah, the training coming up. They've got discovery day coming up. They want to make sure they get into this brand before somebody else takes that territory. And so I'm able to accommodate that. My turnaround time is typically less than 3 days. But yeah, you should ask the attorney whether or not they have the ability to do a review in enough time for you to actually go to that next level.
Another comment I get, not so much a question, but a comment is, oh, my brother-in-law is an attorney. I'll just have him look it over. And I just sigh a little bit because you definitely need someone that's a franchise attorney. In your eyes or your perspective, share a little bit about how you would respond to someone saying that they just know an attorney.
Yes, well, I mean, I've had multiple clients that were attorneys. They were in different areas of law, wills and trusts. One was in I think corporate litigation, and they knew, hey, look, this is not my area. You know, this is an area that a franchise lawyer should look at this. And I've had some clients who've hired that uncle that was just a general attorney, or you know, somebody that specialized in another area. And I actually had that client then call me back a week later and say, "Hey, I talked to my uncle, and he really didn't understand this. I could tell he didn't. So I'm going to hire you anyway." And so it's just always best to go with somebody that knows the industry, you know. So you know, you don't hire a cardiologist for brain surgery, you know. So go to an attorney that specializes in that, and you'll certainly be rewarded with you know, getting your questions answered. That's why you're hiring them.
Yeah, you don't want to be penny wise and dollar stupid.
No, no,
Right?
no,
Yeah.
not at all, not at all.
Any other advice you have for people that are exploring franchises? Are there certain things that you would say to look out for, or just
Well,
general advice?
you'd mentioned timing just now, and you know, I get clients that ask, well, should I go before? Should I do my review before discovery day? I get that question a lot, and my recommendation is yes, do the review before discovery day, because my review will arm you with questions that you can ask face to face at Discovery Day, Founders Day, whatever they want to call it, and ask those questions that you know, I think that should be done face to face. Not necessarily these I gotcha questions, But if there is something wrong, if there's something that doesn't seem right, pull them aside and say, hey, look, I did this review and this is something that I have concern about, and just see how they ask or answer. And, you'll get some excellent feedback from that. You'll get to see how not only they respond, but their overall demeanor. And so I think that matters a lot when you are gauging whether or not you want to enter in a business relationship with them. So I do recommend that you go through the review before discovery day, but I certainly have franchisee clients that hire me after discovery day, and that's more of just confirmation. But it's vital. It's critical. I've definitely have spotted errors in the franchise agreement where that would have caused problems later on. And so they then had a reissue that franchise agreement, wait some days, and then execute. And otherwise there could have been again some issues. So that does happen. That's not often, of course, but it is good for your peace of mind, because you are next or ready to make that next decision, which is should I buy this? And so it's critical to do it either before discovery day, after discovery day. You really absolutely should get an FDD review.
100%. I think having that review done before, it's exactly what you mentioned, where you're able to see how they react with how their demeanor is. There's something to be said about looking at someone in the whites of their eyes and seeing how you feel comfortable with their leadership, asking those questions, see how quickly they respond or how they're responding. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And when you're at discovery day or founders day, again, the franchisors call it a lot of different things. Look, look at how they're interacting with other franchisees. Look at how the franchisors are interacting. The executive leadership team and their staff are interacting with each other. Look at how they're interacting with the wait staff. Typically, you're at a restaurant or bar. You're someplace where there are servers and bussers and people in the service industry. See how they're treating them. That's another thing where I say, hey, look, just always be watching and looking and see if they have similar values to you. And there are different ways that they can franchise, the executive leadership team can express that. But those are just some of the few that I've experienced when I was, on the franchisor side, and then representing franchisees now.
Yeah, that's definitely huge. Are there any crazy stories where you caught something or something exciting that you could tell us?
Um, let's see.
Don't name brands.
I've had some pretty interesting stories. I mean, I've had to get the FBI involved in one. There was a guy in Canada that was essentially making some threats against me and some of the other staff. That was bizarre because he really didn't. I don't know. He had issues with himself and other things. So that was crazy because I literally had to call the FBI and the Canadian police, the Mounties. That was bizarre. Some of the customers that you experience have had, there's some interesting experiences with them where franchisees have called and said, I don't know how to deal with this. And, what can I do? Somebody coming into your location and basically asking for that product for free because they are going to be a billionaire and they've got this amazing concept that's going to revolutionize the world. And they're thinking that you're actually going to give them a free membership because of this idea. I mean, just really just kind of out there situations, but it's variety is the spice of life. And that's what's so great about franchising too, is you get to involve yourself in a lot of different areas of life. I mean, you just see all these different people. So it's always been fun and interesting and kept me on my toes for sure. But there's not one other particular instance that I can think of that I could probably disclose without violating some sort of ethic.
I mean, have you ever looked at an FDD and just been like, oh no?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And what's great is that or what's not what's interesting is the few times, I think it's been maybe 3 times in probably the last year, where I looked at an FDD and I thought, oh my gosh, And then I looked at the notes, and sure enough, that was a candidate that was going on this search without a consultant. And they found this brand on a, some Google search. And I mean, I'm looking at this like, holy mackerel, this is a violation. This is a violation. This is a violation. And them, listing one executive or two executives with 2 years of experience and $1 million investment. And I mean, I've seen some just crazy FDDs that were terrible. And so I'll definitely draw attention to that. I'm not one to tell my clients though whether or not they should buy. That's the decision they should make on their own. But I really, really had to bite my tongue when I did the reviews and not say, "Hey, don't buy this." But I was definitely saying, "Here's a red flag. Here's a red flag. Here's a red flag. Here's a red flag. Ooh, here's something that I like. Here are 10 more red flags." So hopefully you can, ask some probing questions, find out why there's such a mess. And I don't like seeing typos and grammatical mistakes. Those are certainly things that, if they're funny, I'll highlight. But we're all human, we make those mistakes. I certainly did with our documents. And I'll highlight those to help out another attorney. Hey, look, this doesn't really make sense. There are some where I'm thinking, wow, what were they thinking when they wrote this, and who didn't catch this? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. So that's been funny. Yeah. And it's like, I kind of nerd out on that and laugh to myself. And, some of my clients are like, why is that funny? I'm like, sorry, you just don't get it. But yeah, it's interesting. But I do love reviewing FDDs. And that's one of the things that's great about it too. You see some interesting ways that people frame their franchise and how they operate things. And really kind of tease out their personality from a 250, 300-page document. So that's been actually fairly interesting.
I'm going to throw you a curveball question because I think it might be really interesting to hear your thoughts. Everyone's always item 19, item 7. What are some things, like maybe 3 things that you would say get overlooked in an FDD that maybe should be looked at more?
Ooh.
Like 3 tips of things that people maybe overlook that they should really look at more and pay more attention to.
Well, I see my clients tend to gloss over item 2, business experience. And when I'm looking through that, the requirement is basically for the franchisor to disclose an item 2, the business experience of those that are involved in the franchise sales process, and operation of the franchise. But there are different ways to really parse that out and define it. So some franchisors will include, director of training, director of operations, and some will just have bare bones, the executive leadership team, CEO, president, CFO, and then a board member. But I'm always looking to see how the franchisors are framing that and kind of framing their story. I want to see if, of course, if the founder's there. And then look and see the different experiences that the executive leadership team have, what they've got in common, who's bringing franchisor experience to the table, who's bringing, process and procedure experience to the table, who's bringing that all together, who's training you. And sometimes that's all not exactly highlighted there. And so I think that's a missed opportunity, franchisors, to not really frame their story appropriately. And so when I'm doing my review, I do pay close attention to that and look up bios, go on LinkedIn. You can find out a lot of information, obviously online. And so that's one thing that I think is pretty important. Another is if the franchisor is actually registered in California. I think it's great to do a search in California and see the previous marked copy of the FDD beforehand. So it's not necessarily an item in the franchise disclosure document. It's actually comparing previous versions to the version that you've got, to see changes in the system, to see what potential changes you may face. in the system. So that's something that I think is often overlooked. And then I probably say, oh, yeah, I mean, everybody, I always highlight item 7 and 19 and then just say, hey, look, these are just estimates. And this is, here's a disclaimer, here's a disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. You really must validate on your own. That's super critical, super critical. Trying to think of another item though,
I
that
like
was
item,
a sleeper.
yeah, I think item 22, just seeing like, let's say they don't have tons of locations. If they've closed a decent amount, that to me can be a red flag depending on the story behind it. There's
Yeah.
also some type of retraction in a really mature franchise. People are getting older, they're retiring, they're selling. But if you see a lot of movement early on, gets me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, item 20, I believe it's table 4, typically has renewals, terminations, ceased operations for other reasons, and then there's a fourth column in there. And so I look through all 4 columns and just look and see if there are significant closures, terminations, ceased operations for other reasons, and look at what year it is. 2020. You maybe see some closures in 2021. And I'm looking for a pattern then and trying to see, all right, well, have they righted that ship? Have they offloaded the poor performing franchisees and fixed their system, tweaked their model, made themselves leaner and meaner, and more efficient? And sometimes that happens. And COVID obviously did wreak havoc on a lot of franchises. But you also saw a lot that made it through because they were franchises. The franchisor really helped and support them. But yeah, I look at item 20 for sure, and look at the outlets, and see that. And I also look at item 14, trademarks. I'm just the Patent and Trademark Office just came out with a new site that actually displays all their logos in very easy to view format, or all their marks rather. So I look at that too. That's somewhat interesting to see marks that they've filed and why they've filed for those. So you look at the goods and services when you're looking at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and may see different revenue streams where they want to put their logo on water bottles and T-shirts, and then they want to put it on branded some other product that they want to sell. And so then you can look at that and see, oh, wow, they really, are trying to figure out other revenue streams for this brand. So that's another interesting search that I do as part of my review as well. And so looking at item 14 trademarks is something that I think is also important and often overlooked.
That's
Yeah.
really good. That's super helpful. I appreciate you taking the time to come on, spend time with me, and go through the top questions that people really ask about franchise law and franchise attorneys. So just want to say thank you, Kit, for hopping on here. If someone wants to book a call with you or schedule something, what's the best way to go about it?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Yes. Send me an email to, it's very simple. My name is Kit and my law firm is Kit Franchise Law. So my email address is kit@kitfranchiselaw.com. So very simple. Send me an email. Love to get you scheduled as soon as possible and walk you through the FDD.
Awesome. Thank you.